Hey, we are live and on the air for some live processing. I'm AD, and I thought we'd give everybody on the entire web tonight a chance to peek inside of what goes on at House Lightbender and the Arcanum, which normally it's all closed up and no one can see what happens here. But I'm going to do a quick processing tutorial. We have a thing in our cohort called the Alchemy Tower, and it's where the apprentices submit a raw file, and then we all get to process it, and it helps everybody kind of get a look through each other's processing skills and their eyes and what they envision for the particular photo. So I did one today with a sunset where there wasn't a sunset, and there was some interest by the person who posted the photo to see how I did it. So I figured, what the heck, we'll just post it for everybody to check out. So I'm going to screen share. Going to move this over here, so I'm not looking away from you guys, but there's like two screens to look at. So let me get on the right one and get you guys into Lightroom here. All right, you should be seeing Lightroom pop up on your screen. So this is the photo, and it was submitted by Lynn Wazicki, and this is the Valley of Fire in Nevada, which is a totally awesome place to visit. If you ever get a chance to go out there, it is totally unique and amazing and very, very warm there. But a great place to hike, wonderful drive. It's absolutely an amazing drive. And this is just to the east of Vegas, so it's a road that you can take out of Utah from Zion or any part of Utah over there and fly in that way. And it's a great trip down through the Valley of Fire. So the very first thing I wanted to do was give this. When I first saw this photo, the first thing I thought was, man, it needs some sky. It's a cool shot. It's got the beautiful S-curve road through there. And of course, my brain goes crazy with, like, okay, so the very first thing I see is, oh, geez, there's a dust spot. We got to get rid of that. And no, here's a couple signs. We got to get rid of those. And there's some signs down here we got to get rid of and all that. So, but the first thing was the sky. In order to do all of that, though, I need to prep this file before we start adding things to it and get it ready for that. So the very first thing I did was went in and I used the spot removal tool here, and I found this spot and got rid of it. That was the only major one that was in there that was standing out to me. And then I cropped the entire photo down to this and adjusted the white balance a little bit to give us some daylight and bring out these red rocks. And then I set the lens profile, which is down here in Lightroom, to the Nikon that she was using, and removed any chromatic aberrations. That'll get rid of any type of blue or purple fringing that might appear in any high contrast areas and around the edges of the photo. And then I set the camera profile for neutral because I really want to just basically not have any color embellishment going on. And then I looked at a couple other profiles such as the landscape, kind of like the pop that gave to it, so I saved that for a little bit. Made some adjustments to the shadows up here. I boosted the shadows up 100% to really bring out any of these spots, so it looked like a nice even light was showing here. Adjusted the highlights down to add a little bit more color, and adjusted the exposure after that, and then the contrast. The contrast really was done just so I could basically bring out these mountains, because we're going to do some masking and get rid of that. So, and the whole idea here is to get a basic look. It's not really to get the final product, but it's just working towards the basic look of what I wanted for the photo. Then I went in amongst several attempts to find out the best crop for this particular shot. So you can see here through my history there were quite a few different crops to get it just the way I wanted to. And I finally settled on that for the crop. And the reason why is basically the scene needed to be leveled, so we did that in that cropping as well. But the other thing is to balance the way that the mountain comes into the scene and the way that it exits the scene. It makes for a nice balanced photograph. And Trey talks about this quite a bit in a lot of critiques that he does on photos. So my attempt there was to remove this extra part of the mountain that was over here and really just balance the scene. here nicely. Okay, let's see, what else did I do? Oh, I tried to do some spot removal and that didn't work, so I decided not to do that. I did add graduated filter to this, into the upper half to darken the skies a little bit, and then I kind of adjusted that and updated the exposure and clarity, and then messed around with all of that stuff so that I could finally arrive at this for my final image before I took it into Photoshop. So essentially what I tried to do is bring out as much contrast in this mountain and lower the saturation so that it didn't, before I lowered the saturation, it was really starting to oversaturate in the sky and wasn't balanced well with the rest of the photo. So I need kind of a clean saturation up there to do the masking work that I'm going to do. So after that, that kind of ends the Lightroom portion of the adjustments that I did. And then I took it over into Photoshop and did some layering work and all that. And I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to show you the finalized photo, what we're working towards. I posted this on Facebook, but this was the final photo after I was done doing all the adjustments. And we're going to show you that photo as well. So I'm going to bring both of those right now into Photoshop by selecting both photos and then edit in Photoshop. And that'll load up for you while I get a drink. Oh, and I just did something wrong, so you get to watch me do something wrong. As that loads up, what I neglected to do was to load this in as layers. So don't save it, go back, and just need to get this one file is all we need. So it's gonna, if I did what I just did again and load it at this dialog right here, when I go to load it into Photoshop, if I select Edit Copy with Lightroom Adjustments, it flattens the image. I originally saved this with the layers intact, so I'm selecting Edit Original here. So basically that allows me to go back and work with those layers again without flattening the image on a new copy. It's a little dangerous, but when you're showing it as a demonstration, it's important for me to get my layers back so I can show you guys what I did instead of redoing all of that from scratch. And then I'm going to do it live so you can watch me screw it up live, because that's always fun too. Alright, so here's all the layers that I created, and I'll turn all of them off and then back on so you can see what's going on here. Oops, get them all. Alright, so there's our starting image, and it didn't quite look like that. It looked like this when it first came in. And the very first thing I did was I masked out the upper part of this sky here and made it into a layer mask so that I could add in some clouds. I added in the cloud layer. And then I decided, well, I think I'd like to add another cloud layer, so I duplicated that and added another cloud layer just to give it some depth. And then I decided, well, let's attempt to try to make some sort of colored sky sunset here. So the first thing I did was to add a vibrance or a color adjustment layer and attach it to this layer below so that it only affects that layer. And then in those adjustments, let me double click on them here, I made some colorized, I checked off colorize, and then I just basically slid this until I got the color that I wanted in the sky, and that's what we went for. So we were trying to create some sort of sunset here. So I'm going to do these, again, like I said, live so you can see how I did them. I'm just going to explain to you quickly, and it'll be easier for you to understand when I do them for real, because they'll be a little different when I do them for real. So this is the second layer that I added. You can see that cloud layer in behind there. Basically just duplicated the mask and then added another big cloud brush and put it in there. And then added another vibrancy color adjustment layer and attached that to just this layer. So it's not affecting anything below it, it's just affecting the layer that it's attached to. And I made some adjustments there and went with sort of just a kind of a yellow look to the clouds there. And I really liked the way that that all came out. Then finally, I added a final blank layer, and I put a gradient in behind this to really make the sky look more like a sunset looks. As the sky changes color, it usually does it in a gradient. So I added this gradient in behind both of those clouds. So without the clouds there, it kind of looks like so. And then we add the clouds back in, and you get that. And then this layer was adjusted for opacity. So I didn't like the full-born, like that was just too much. So I pulled it back to get a nice, soft, late afternoon sky there. And finally, because the sky colors don't really reflect in the ground, it kind of looks out of place. So I turned all of that stuff off. Ta-da, turn it all off, man. Okay. And once that was all off, I created a copy of the background layer, just dragged this down to the layer icon, copied it, so that made a second layer for me. And then I took this into Topaz Restyle, and I played around with it and came up with a color gradation of this for the foreground. Now, because I created masks, that means that I can change the color of the foreground and change the sky color and basically put all this together into what works out as a photo that looks realistic, looks like it was actually during this time of the day, and we got some of these colors from the sky now down here in the rest of the photo. And that's how I created the photo. So now let's actually create it, or recreate it, or create a new version of it. How's that? All right, so we go over here to our original file again. So the very first thing I need to do is I need to create these layer masks, and they're very simple and very easy to do for these skies. So I'm going to make a copy of the background, just dragging that background down to the layer icon. New layer icon here makes a brand new layer out of it. Okay, and then I'm going to take the quick selection selection tool, and I'm going to draw across here, and it's going to select everything that I don't want, which is crazy, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So to get this back to just the mountains, all I need to do is be on the subtract selection and draw now back over the mountains themselves. And you'll see that the program figures it out nicely and selects just that sky. I'm going to get rid of all these little extraneous ants running around here just by drawing the subtract over top of them. Very easy way to mask out the sky, and so nothing else creeps through on that. So we've got a selection of the sky now. We need to create it into, or turn it into a mask. It's just as simple as hitting the mask button down here at the bottom, and that will take our selection and turn it into a nice mask. I've explained masks before, but I'll do it for anybody who's not sure of what they are. But if you think of this as looking at this as a file folder, whatever layer is on top is the layer that shows closest to you. So anything I draw on this layer, see if I turn the background off, you can see that it disappears on just the part that the mask is allowing through. So when we draw a mask, we make like a screen that you can see through. And wherever it's black says that we can actually see through the mask and see what's below it. And wherever it's white will be showing us only what is on that actual layer that the mask is on. So essentially, if I turn this off and I put something in this layer and I turn it on and off, only the part that's white will show up here on top. So I'll show you how that works. The next thing I need to do is disconnect from that layer. And normally when I'm in create mode, I don't know how many layers I'm going to do, but this time I kind of know. So I'm going to save a few steps here, and I'm going to create some more layers. So the very first thing I want to do is erase everything that's in this top layer, because we're going to put something new in there. So I'm going to select all, which is Control or Command A, and then clear. And that just got rid of everything in there. So if I turn off the bottom layer, you can see there's nothing left now in there. So that just gives us a nice blank palette to start with. All right, I'm going to deselect that with Command or Control D. And then I'm going to make copies of this now, because otherwise, if you wait and you create a layer and you make copies, it does funky things with the resizing and all that. So I'm going to do it now and get it over with. So we're going to create 2 more layers. All right, so we know the bottom layer here is going to be our graduated or our gradient sky, so we're going to turn that off for right now. We want to create some cloud layers now out there in the sky. So we have these 2 nice masks. They're all cut off here perfectly at the mountain range, which is going to work great for us. And I'm going to come up here and select a cloud brush. I've released a bunch of these cloud packs. They're basically nice big brushes. that consist of skies that I've captured, and we're going to use a couple of those to replace the sky and create our own version of a sunset. So we're going to take this one first, and you notice it's a little smaller than the actual layer. That's fine. So brushes can only, in CC in 2014 and CS6 can only be 5,000 pixels. So this photo is a little larger than that, but they'll stretch out and work just fine. So I have white selected over here on my palette. I'm going to go with white for now because we're going to color it, and plop that guy right down there. That's going to be our back. I think that looks good for a background layer. So it's not, there's not too many clouds or lower clouds. This would be a higher cloud layer. So we're going to stretch that out now using transform and scale. And you can see that we can make a nice sky here just simply like that. That's as easy as it is to create a sky using these brushes and this technique. So that just gives us a nice basic sky to start with. And like I said, I think this is going to be like our background layer. I think these are higher clouds that'll look good for that. And we're going to go to the next layer up, and we're going to create a new cloud layer there as well. Let's see what we got here. A bunch of things to choose from. Generally, your puffy clouds are a little lower, so I'm going to go with that. Put those in there. This will be an interesting sunset when we get done with it. So that's on another layer. So we have one layer with the clouds there, and then we have another layer behind that. All right. We're going to stretch these out as well. Just gives us a nice cloud layer there. There we go. All right, cool. So now we got a couple of clouds in there. We could stop right there if we wanted to, but I was like, no, you know, let's play around with this a little bit and see if we can come up with a nice sunset-looking type sky for the desert here. So the next thing to do is to color these layers. So that's as easy as basically selecting on the layer and then coming up here to adjustments and throwing down a hue and saturation adjustment on that particular layer. Now, if I adjust this right now, it's going to adjust the whole photo. So if you watch this, you can see that that's definitely not what we want to do right there. I mean, not for this project at least. So let's zero that out, get that back to normal. So the way that we get this to only control the clouds themselves is we hold down our Alt key or Option key on the Mac, and if you hover your mouse right in between the two layers that you want to attach to each other, this little box will come up. And basically this is attach layer box, and we just click on that. Whoops, I always do that. Let's click over here. And what that did is now attach that color control just to this layer. So now when I make adjustments, you can see that only that layer is being adjusted. So you can see the dark and so on. You can do all sorts of cool things now with the sky. And it's just affecting just that cloud layer and nothing else. So I'm going to colorize this. And in order to get it to work properly, you kind of have to move the lightness down a little bit for the color to show. So we can put in a nice, start with a nice orange layer in there. And you'll play with these more as you add the particular colors just to get them the way that you want. So we're going to do the same thing again for the layer above that. Select the layer, select hue and saturation from the adjustment box, and then attach it to by holding down Alt or Option in between the layers and clicking. That attaches it to the layer below. Select Colorize, darken it up a little bit, add a little bit of color. Now it's always important to be very subtle with your coloring, because obviously, you know, we're trying to make this kind of believable. I mean, I'm not going to come in and do a crazy coloring like so unless I'm really going for some sort of dark cloud look or something like that. So, you know, you want to be very slight with the color because we're going to actually add stuff to this anyways. So I don't want to really get too nuts with it, just a little bit. All right. There we go. Okay, so now the only thing we have left is our third layer, which is on the bottom, and that's where we're going to put our gradient on that particular layer. All right. Sorry, David, just muting here. All right, so on our bottom layer, which is this one down here at the bottom, we left behind on its own. We're going to go ahead and activate that. And now I'm going to add a gradient to that. So come over here to the gradient tool. And this is the same gradient that I used before, but there are some other ones in here that are pretty cool as well. I don't think there'll be any green skies in there. So we're going to pretty much probably go for something like this. And then essentially you can draw your gradient however you want, depending on your sun direction, however you want to do it. I think, you know, that kind of looks more like a sunset because there's yellow in the background. And the gradient tool is nice because it allows you to, basically it draws the gradient from end to end. So if you go way out here, then the purple will be way off screen. So you can kind of control what colors end up where, which I really like a lot. Kind of like that look a little right there. It's pretty close. All right. So say I'm going to go with that. That's going to be my background. Again, it's pretty harsh. So if you use your opacity to control that, you can lighten that up a little bit and kind of work with it. Now, the biggest thing that I'm noticing when I'm working on this is, and you're probably noticing it too, is that the contrast of the sky does not match the rest of the scene, but we're going to work on that in just a minute. So I'll show you how that goes as well. What we want to take note of right now is just the kind of basic colors that we have in the sky, because we're going to work on the foreground next. So that's basically our sky, and remember, you kind of have to have the end vision a little bit of where we're going to take this, but by the time we add contrast and everything to this, that'll pop out nicely. We don't want to overdo it now because we won't have any control of it later on. So I'm going light right now so we can add a little bit more later on. So now we'll work on just the background. I'm going to turn off all my other layers so that I can clearly see my background. I always love it when you have to do that every time. Hope they fix that. All right, and then you go ahead and make a copy of your background. Again, we don't want to edit our background directly because if you mess up, you can always go back and change that. And so there's a couple of different ways you can go here. You can work in Topaz Restyle, which is a really nice 3D LUT program that basically will allow you to control the palette of the overall scene, and it's got a lot of nice suggestions. If you don't have Topaz Restyle, Photoshop actually has this particular adjustment built in. You don't have as many selections, but if you hunt around the net, you can find quite a few of them. And where it's located is right down here at the bottom, right below the layers. There's this little pop-up tool that gives you photo filters underneath here that you can actually make into an adjustment layer. So we can select color lookup from there, and that creates a brand new layer here on top, and you'll see this dialog box pop up. And in this top section here, the 3D LUT file is a lighting file, and there are all these different setups that you can actually apply to your photo. So one I used earlier on a photo was down here somewhere. Where is it? Edgy Amber? No, that wasn't it. Wow, it's pretty hot. Fall Colors, I think. So it's just a nice way to color grade your particular photo. And there's a bunch of different styles in here that you can go with. Some of them are harsh, some of them are nice and soft, and that sort of stuff. Here's a late sunset. And you can match up your colors with your sky in the direction that you're going to kind of give it that look. So if I go with, let's see, we'll go with the Fall Colors again. It's pretty close. Needs a little bit of adjustment maybe. So that's one way to do it, and I'll show you the other way, which is Topaz Restyle. So if you have this plugin, it's really awesome. I really like it a lot. It gives me great ideas for coming up with different colors. So remember, I'm still on my background layer copy here. And this is the particular one that I actually used, which was a seascape style. And in Restyle, it's really awesome because it gives you these palettes, and you can just scroll through them and find something that you really dig. It's an easy way to find the color palette that you want for the scene and go for that actual color so that you can get it the way that you want to. So yeah, let me just see. Go with that. I think the one I selected is the one we're going with. Yeah, let's cancel out of that. So, all right. So basically, we graded the rest of this ground to kind of reflect what was going on in the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that, and you'll see when we turn our layers back on that this plugin only affected the foreground of the photo, which is exactly what we wanted to happen. So let that go ahead and generate. All right. And if we turn this back on, turn off, let's get rid of that LUT file. All right. So there we go. So that's our basic file as the way that I kind of want it at this point. And from here, we're going to probably make small adjustments to kind of get things exactly the way that we want to. And then we'll start flattening this file and then take it back into Lightroom and do our final on it. One of the things that I did do with this photo, I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you, but I got rid of most of the signage. We have a real bad habit of just putting signs everywhere. So I don't know why, but we just must feel that everybody needs to have signs for everything that we do. I think there was a famous song or something about that. But anyways, I went through and removed all of the signage using Content Aware, got rid of all this stuff. I'm not going to do all that right now, but I just let you know that's what went on in the final photo. So once this is done, all you need to do at this point is you can flatten this image up completely, or if you feel that you want to work on it some more, if your color process isn't right, I suggest that you just hit save at this point. And that's going to send it back into Lightroom as a file that has all these layers still in it instead of flattening it out. If I flatten it and save it, then we can't go back and edit these layers later on if we want to. So I'm going to just save it as it is. And you'll see it popped up back over here in my Lightroom. And now what I've done to take it from there to there was to essentially go through and I added a basic gradient layer to control the sky color. So I can control the temperature of the sky, all sorts of things to kind of match it more towards the photo. I can take some of the saturation out if I want to. I can contrast it up if I want to. So all sorts of different things that you could do now with just using this like a graduated filter, so to speak, which is essentially exactly what it is. And I did some more adjustments in the other file. I didn't like the big color that was appearing up here, so I added a secondary gradient file or gradient tool overlay here, and then took that and zeroed everything out and removed some saturation from that just to kind of lighten that up a little bit. And that gets us pretty close to our final image. So that's all there was to adding our own sky. Now, obviously, when you're doing this, you're gonna color match and you're gonna spend an awful lot more time on it. I spent more time on this particular photo getting it so that it all graded out and looked the same. And then I think there was some saturation adjustments and other things that I did in here, temperature adjustments and all that kind of stuff. But it still was the basic outline on how I created that file. So anybody have any questions at all about any of that? Chime in now, hit your unmute button so I can go over anything. Right, Jake? Thanks. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the broadcast. That's kind of what goes on here. We talk about this stuff all the time here in the Arcanum, and really happy that you guys got a chance to tune in. We had 17 viewers out there. That's pretty awesome. And yeah, so I hope you guys can join us again. Thanks so much. I'm going to stop the broadcast.